Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the special legal compliance session run by Kaizen Synergy Law Firm. My name is Nihal Samara. I'm the General Counsel and Legal Director here at Kaizen Synergy, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's session. Today's session finds us some months later into the COVID pandemic. We're framing this particularly in relation to the challenges that agencies are now facing and something that we've been across since really the start of this pandemic. Our law firm has been running these legal compliance sessions almost weekly throughout the pandemic. Our work has taken us across into the COVID compliance space, and with that, all of our past webinars are actually published around COVID safety and COVID compliance on our Gemba 360 YouTube channel, and we've made these freely available to agencies, particularly across these pandemic, during this pandemic period as things have rolled out. With that said, there are a range of issues and challenges now that agencies are facing, particularly within this COVID-19 lockdown spaces. We're seeing this in Victoria, New South Wales, Victoria particularly, where AGMs are now needing to be organised. And what this actually looks like for people is now changing again too. So how you actually go about meeting your legal compliance obligations is something that agencies do need to start considering as we are now going into AGM season. In some ways, the good part about this is that, when I say good part, is that we've got some guidelines and rules, because in some ways, for some agencies, you've done this before last year. We're going to build off some of these rules. We're going to build off some of the learnings from when we actually held this webinar last year around this time as agencies were going into their annual general meetings. What we're also finding just before we start as well too is that for some agencies, there are also new accounting standards that you also need to meet as well too. So if running your AGM wasn't hard enough, we've also advised some agencies already about the changing of accounting standards that actually took, that were initially scheduled for January 2020 and now have taken effect from June 2021 this year. And I'll cover those off for you today. So let's get started around this. We have a large number of agencies joining us today. So with that, and a number of agencies that are joining us new for the first time as well. With that said, all of this material that I am showing you today will be made available to you via your Gemba 360 dashboard. The webinar is being recorded as well too, because we have a significant number of agencies that couldn't actually join us because they had other meetings at this point of time as well too. So the webinar as well as the slides will also be made available to you. And as always, at the end of the session, more than happy to stay online and answer any questions that you might have. Certainly, as we go through, if you do have questions, by all means, use the questions panel, and I'll get to those as we go through it as well too. So let's have a look at preparing and holding your AGM. What does that actually look like during COVID-19? Many places are still in lockdown and there are rolling rule changes that are occurring. And what does this look like? What do you need to consider? What do you need to do around this as well? As always, we'd like to pay our respects to the elders past and present upon the lands on which we all meet. While this session is being run by webinar and recorded, we do pay our respects to the traditional owners where we all meet and where you are all joining us today, and ancestors past and present as well. Now, today's agenda, we are looking at specifically what does this mean for your AGM? What do you need to tell members? How should you run an AGM? What is the governance reporting structure And lastly, we'll be touching on changes to accounting standards for financial reporting obligations. That said, there are key things that we can look at. Obviously, there was determinations and ministerial publications made last year around moving to an online environment. What we have seen come from that is when we've supported agencies around their governance and compliance obligations, we now have some learnings that we've run through with agencies and what's been done well, what would need to be improved, and what do you need to be aware about in terms of meeting and running your AGM as well too. Now, that said, let me just walk you through where we're going with all of this and give you some really practical tools as well as cover off your legal obligations within this. So there is an obligation to have an annual general meeting each year, whether you're registered under things like the Corporations Act or associations or Incorporated Associations Act in your relevant state and territory. I'm going to say there are quite some general rules that we can apply in this circumstance. And one of those is the obligation to have an AGM. That said, there's also work health and safety legislation. There's public health orders issued by the chief medical officers in the different states and territories, and these are largely done under the Public Health and Wellbeing Act. What this essentially means is that really there are rules that prevent you in some ways from having people grouped together in a confined space as we might have done prior to the COVID pandemic. So what this essentially means is that the directors or the board members of your agencies, as well as officers of the companies, and that may well be your chief financial officer, chief executive officer, who have responsibilities, I'm going to say even including that EAs to the CEO as well too, in terms of keeping which often the responsibilities of keeping members' information up to date is also falls back on. So within last year, Josh Frydenberg, the Treasurer, Commonwealth Treasurer, issued a media release back in July 2020. So essentially about just over 12 months ago. And as part of that, the release was to allow AGMs and amend the relevant legislation to allow AGMs to be run online, to allow agencies like yourselves to achieve a quorum with members attending online and provide notice of annual general meetings to members, for example, using email and the likes, where your rule books or constitutions may not have actually allowed that to happen itself as well too. So it also gave businesses certainty when it came to company officers signing documents electronically, and to ensure that things like agendas and minutes and very key AGM documents could essentially be signed off even electronically as well too. Now, with this, there is also the requirement that your members need the reasonable opportunity to participate in this. And members will need to be able to continue to be able to put questions to board members and vote online and the likes, and also for directors to execute documents and sign things electronically. And we're now seeing really this change, obviously, with where you're sitting at the moment, of how are you trying to organize even current board meetings. And we're seeing this at the moment, and our law firm is actually called to interimly to support boards and committees and directors and CEOs on, the disruption that COVID-19 is actually causing to ordinary board meetings, let alone actually trying to organize AGMs. And one of the things I will just say here for you to actually utilize, which all of you will have access to, is the Gemba Dashboard. Now, with this is something that a lot of agencies, clients of ours, already use. And I really just wanted to focus on three things here for yourselves. And you all will have access to this today around getting access and viewing this. And essentially what it does is three major things from a board reporting and AGM point of view. Within this, you can, first of all, load in, which a lot of agencies have done, load in their board minutes and agendas. And you can do that by placing it on the Gemba Docs section. And you can see here that we're now created and we've got a Board of Management folder. From here, we can actually load in our board papers, and we can actually now create a special folder called AGM Documents. Okay. And once I've got this set up, it's a matter of filling that in, adding the folders, and then from here, I can actually upload specific documents directly for people to use and access as well. And permission levels can also be set as well too from here. What you're able to then do is actually circulate these out securely. So it's the board minutes are not going out directly via email. It's a link that people have. So if I wanted to, let's say, send this out to all the staff, I can select all the staff that we have here. I can say AGM notice. And from here, let's say if I wanted to, I don't need to send it to a couple of people here. And I can essentially then just click on post notice, or I can actually attach a document directly from here. And this post notice screen essentially allows me to send all of this information directly out to key staff members or the whole group and essentially it's not then just under the public domain, it's essentially sent directly to the people that I wanted this sent to. And I can just simply click post notice and we are away. And with this, we're finding that agencies are already using this, because that way you can then also see exactly who's read it and when, and you've got this documentation ready to go. And you'll then see that it appears on your notice board and emails are automatically sent out. The other part of it that I will mention that is really important from a documentation point of view is your membership registers as well too. So as we're going through, and I'll talk about this a bit further, is the membership registers. And under the HR section, you've got this section that says members. And from here, you can actually update your membership details. You can verify details of contact information. You can verify email addresses, etc., and load that information in. So you've got the one-stop board documentation and information all in one spot across your Gemba dashboard. With that, we've also got on here, and this is one of the big sections, is that agencies have said, look, we want to have conversations with people. We don't want to use social media where comments and things are quite public. So what you've got here is the My Network section. And this allows you to essentially have a private social network that's only really there for your agency to view. You can then access this. You can set this up for your own groups. People then can communicate with you leading up to your AGM. And some of the questions that we're actually going to talk about and unpack today can also be discussed here. And it gives you this space to really engage with your members as well too, in a private context as well. Going back to the HR section, I can see that there's a couple of questions here. You can then essentially add people's profiles in. I'm doing this manually. And then also view information across the different profiles. And so you've got your personal contact information, emergency contact details, etc. And for those of you that are actually registering vaccination cards as well too, and information, you can load that in here as well. So you've got this space to actually use for your key governance and reporting requirements, and also engagement with your members. And it's something that agencies last year have been using for their preparation of their AGM. And it really gives you this spot in order to use for agendas and minutes, circulation of notices, doing it in a public way, and also keeping your membership register information up to date. And those are the core things, especially from the governance point of view, that you have access to. Now, with the legal obligations that you need to meet. Let's have a look at what this is. So essentially the challenges, let's just talk about the challenges of what we have, and then we're going to go through of how to address these. Now, there are a number of challenges caused by COVID-19, and we've seen this last year during the AGM season. Obviously, social distancing rules and number of people coming together. So the current social distancing rules imposed by Australian governments may restrict the ability to hold an AGM while also complying with COVID-19 restrictions. And we're seeing this now really in a jigsaw puzzle based type of approach taken by a number of different governments, especially in Victoria, New South Wales, and Queensland. In doing that, what you do need to consider is that some regulators' permission to delay AGMs does not, unfortunately, stop possible action being taken by people in relation to your AGM as well too. So having this idea, and people have said, well, can we not just push our AGM out even further to avoid some of these challenges? And you can push it out to a later period of time. The problem that you then face is, well, what happens if we go into lockdown during that spot lockdown during that time? So unlike the last year where there was broader lockdown periods, what we're finding is that as we're trying to reach this vaccination limit of what we're trying to, or goal of what we're trying to achieve, governments are kind of going in and out of lockdowns and extending them, and people are just really confused of, well, can I just simply push this right out to next year? So unfortunately, the answer is no, you can't keep pushing your AGM out. You do need to hold one. So essentially, if that's the case, then how can we actually, or what are the things or tools that you can use you're legally able to do it, and how can you actually do this? So essentially what we've seen is a change to the Corporations Act. Now, the changes to the Corporations Act actually occurred last year, and we've now seen it where it allows companies to hold AGMs and meetings entirely online. And from that overview of the changes means that you can provide notice of the annual general meetings to members using email, but only for those members who have provided an email address. The balance will still need to get a letter or postcard by mail telling them how to find the notice online. Now, I can see a few questions already coming up. Yes, we will actually send these slides out to you, and you can start using these today. Now, for that reason, when we've said to people, look, start collecting your email addresses, start looking at things like your HR spaces, and actually looking at contact information, grabbing things like people's email details, registering what those are, so that when you come to it and you want to run a report of how you're actually traveling, it should be as simple as literally going, okay, run a report. Right now I can see exactly how many people I've actually got across this space for my emails. Okay, I now need to update this further. So you can then export this directly out as well too. So you've got this toolbox that's there. So if you need to start collecting email information, which you may not have actually had, essentially this is a part and process to actually follow. And I'll give you a series of recommendations and checklists to look at. The other part is actually holding hybrid or virtual annual general meetings. Now, what we mean by that is essentially using one or more technologies without attendees being physically present. Now, you can do this by holding either virtual meetings or essentially using a hybrid, which is a combination of both. So you might have, and what we found actually works really effective for agencies is that they might have their core, what I'll call core group, or minimum people together. So it might be CEO, president, they might have the EA of the CEO, who often does the secretariat work, CFO and the likes together, and they're the ones who are essentially coordinating the others together. So essentially you've got this hybrid that comes in. You may have people, we know that we work with a lot of Aboriginal community-controlled organisations, and a lot of elders still like to come in. Again, it's based on what current rules that you need to follow up in terms of the limitations and specific requirements that are set there as well. So essentially you can hold hybrid meetings in order to meet your quorums and the likes. Now, part of this is also which we've said is test technology in advance of your AGMs. And we can again help you with this. Part of that is to look at the risk of technology failure, and meeting invalidity is not addressed. So essentially, how can you actually run some of these meetings? Do you test these out before you run the sessions as well too? We've had some agencies that have really almost done a test run just to make sure that things can work, and they've got their support desk that's running with them as well too, so that if links aren't there or something's coming up, that they're able to support people as well. So essentially, there are a number of tactics that you can use in your, I'll call it, arsenal to prepare for your AGMs. Now, what has essentially changed that you need to be aware of, and what is open to you from a legal compliance point of view that you can look at? Well, essentially, we've identified as part of your meetings key requirements that were changed last year and essentially are open for you to use. So essentially, meetings may be held using more than one technology. So that way you're not linked to just using one specific program, if you like. So that way it is open. There is multiple ways for people to actually join. All persons participating in the meeting are taken for being present as well too, which is the other thing to consider. So that way, once people actually do sign in, and essentially they are considered to be participating, a vote can be taken at the meeting, but it must be taken on a poll and not a show of hands. Again, this can be used by more than one technology, so that some people have said, can people phone in? Can people conference in? Can people be there online if you're running hybrids? And the answer is yes to all of those as well too. But what we have suggested, and it is in the legislation, is by recording their vote in advance, which is the way to do it. And also this requires that proxies may be appointed, again, using more than one technology. But again, we suggest that you do these early in terms of how it actually works for your agency. The other parts that you also need to consider is that modifications to changing a meeting as well too. The person required or permitted to give notice of an AGM that is held as mentioned above must include the notice of the information as well, and also how to connect to that particular meeting as well, which you would really expect is what you would do anyway around some of your previous works as well. And again, it covers off how to appoint a proxy, which we've got checklists for you. Now, with each of these, this is what I've said to you in the past. Looking at this, people go, well, how do we actually meet some of these requirements? Things like giving people notice, looking at what agendas are being set, how do people register emails or proxies? And what we found is that, again, people have actually utilized the Gemba Dashboard around this. We've got agencies that have actually really used this very, very well across the board as well too, and also seen it work for agencies in terms of helping them, importantly, not only run their AGM, but also prepare for their AGM as well too. So let's unpack off what a virtual versus hybrid AGM is and what you can do to support this. So a virtual AGM is essentially you run your AGM online where people attend, vote, and ask questions all online, like what we're doing now. And essentially that is an example of a virtual type of AGM type model. Hybrid AGMs allows members to attend a physical venue or through an online platform. So there's the option there. Now, some people have said, what if I've already sent out my AGM notice and you want to change it? Well, essentially, you can change it if you are running it as an electronic message and also a notice on your website as well too. Now, what do you actually think about, first of all, when you start to organize your AGM? So first of all, what we've said is, well, consider whether to move to a hybrid or virtual meeting. We've actually said it gives you flexibility around this, running hybrid meetings as well, whether to send electronic copies of the notice online in line with the new laws that we've seen. If you do, then you need to get the members' email addresses if you don't have it and I'd say get it from them and start making the calls if you haven't done it already. Now, essentially, you can push the AGM backwards if you need to. If you've already organised the date, you've got the capacity to do this to give you more time to organise it. But importantly, you do need to look at your safe work attendance and requirements, and this will be guided by actually what the various states governments are actually directing, particularly if you're in Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland at the moment. So really what is not on, I'll say, the minister's determination from last year and changes. So what we have set for agencies, and we've got templates around this, is to look at things like letting your members know, first of all, obviously the date of when the AGM is. Is it virtual or hybrid? And is it held in compliance with the corporation's law as well? What is the COVIDSafe statement and access to the AGM? If there are any troubles during the day, what do I do? And that's actually a really important part that we found was really useful for agencies last year. When they ran this, it is that COVIDSafe statement, which again, it isn't actually in the legislation that you must mandatory put it in. But operationally, if you think about it, if you're going to hold a hybrid AGM, again, if there's any troubles accessing it during the day or accessing your virtual link, what do you do? Who do you actually contact to get assistance on the day for this? So those little things we've actually found have made a massive difference to agencies last year when they were actually organising their AGM notices, because it gave you very clear things of what to actually do. And a couple of people have said, where do we get our templates from? It is actually loaded in your Gemba dashboard as well too, and you are able to access these as well. Now, the other parts of this is what we've said to agencies is look at the different channels of what and how you're actually communicating with members. It can be through your website, through your email, through mail, and obviously phone as well too. But set out the parameters early of when, of why, when, and how you will hold your AGM. And importantly, why this mode of meeting has been chosen around it. Include things like, and I've got these on the slides in front of you, include things like contact phone numbers for questions and specific timelines that this will be open. Also, if you do have options for proxy voting as well too, clear instructions on how and where and when these need to be returned, if it is by email or mail, or if this will be opened on the day for your agency to actually use as well. Now, those 4 dot points are really some of the legal compliance, what I'll call operational items to actually think about. Some of the time we've seen agencies actually send some of this information out and then they've realized, oh, it's something so simple that we actually forgot. What we found is that this works because we've already gone through this with agencies last year around this. So then the question comes up also, and a few people have asked the question here, I can see already, if your membership is not really online or is not really technology literate, what can you actually do, or how do you then do that as well too? So make sure with it, you may offer alternative proxy voting by mail, and make sure you allow what we call a decent amount of time for people to receive their papers and respond to them. So those are generally the ways that you actually can achieve this as well. The other part I did need to mention to you is that there has been changes to the financial accounting standards as well. And I'm just laughing because a few people have just put in the comments, could there be any more changes on top of what we need to deal with? That's correct, essentially. So on March 2018, the International Accounting Standards Boards issued its revised, what we call conceptual framework to the annual periods beginning on the 1st of January 2020. These revised frameworks effectively adopted a new concept of reporting rather than just the statement of accounting concepts. Now, this is just, I'm going to say, a bit of legal and financial jargon around this, but I will summarize this down in the next slide for you. So essentially, many constitutions and other documents presently contain, and your rule book would have the same thing of some sort, presently contain a general requirement to prepare financial statements. Generally, they're in accordance with the Australian accounting standards. With the idea of, and I can see many of the CFOs bouncing some questions up to us. Yes, that's correct, because many of those have been looked at for this, what we call special purpose financial accounting standards. And so with that, there are no users dependent on general purpose financial statements, but special purpose financial statements would have sufficed. What we've seen since 1st of Jan was that certain entities and agencies whose constitutions or rule books or other documents, and other documents include funded financial agreements. For example, if your agency is funded by your state or Commonwealth government, and if these were amended or changed after the 1st of July 2021, then essentially these standards started to become relevant. And essentially on this basis, if it essentially was changed after the 1st of July 2021, then essentially what you're going to need to consider moving forwards is that you may need to move to a general purpose financial statement if you haven't already done so. So it is something that your agencies do need to consider as part of that, and you may need to report that in your AGM report that you're moving to the new financial accounting standards. And that also impacts on things like any leases that you may have, any contracts that you might have with funding bodies, for example, state or Commonwealth departments. So that's the summary of what the financial accounting standards would mean. We would recommend that we're more than happy to advise you on that. So if you do have any questions, by all means, please contact us. What our recommendations are, and we've got just a series of recommendations to make this easy as possible for you, so you do not get lost on organizing your AGM. These include setting up your Gemba Dashboard, updating your membership lists on the HR side to include email addresses, loading things like your agendas and AGM documentation, giving access to your agency staff and volunteer and other persons access to some of these notices, looking at reviewing the need to hold non-essential rules, and from there, looking at your agency rules under your current constitutions and what your obligations are, looking at where a meeting cannot be postponed to ensure that you meet your specific state laws, your work health and safety requirements and attendance registers, and we'll give you checklists around those, and ensure members are kept up to date during this time as you start to look at key requirements that you need to meet. Equally, look at then from there, carefully consider when your AGM will be scheduled. Look at the changes that you are able to access to running your AGM, and carefully consider how your AGM will be held and what the interaction in real time works for you, and also whether this works. Now, that is the part of it that we've actually suggested to agencies. Interaction in real time sounds really cool to actually do, but can it really work for your agency? You may need to consider obviously access to your members, whether that is something that they can use, whether you do need to organize a hybrid meeting between a series of technologies as well too. We will open up the phone lines, and more than happy to stay online and answer any questions that people might have. If you are listening to this recording after today's live session and you do have any questions, by all means, please contact us on 1300 360 360, or you can email us at support@gemba360.com.